All right, welcome to episode 29 of The Expert and the Idiot. Today I'm talking to Washington Lopez of Boa DNA. And I was just reading this sign behind you, and it says, I've failed over and over and over again in my life, and that is why I succeed. Is that your mantra? Is that something that you carry with you all the time?
You know, that's something that reminds me, and that was, wait, what is it? I'm looking at a reverse. That's Michael Jordan. It's written right at the bottom. And Michael Jordan, for me, is one of my role models, heroes, just in general, the tenacity that he brings to the sport and what he's done. Kind of reminds me, I failed at times. I failed at different things. And one thing, like, for example, that we can get into later is could be like the being an Apache helicopter pilot. You know, that didn't pan out as I thought it would. It's a bit of a long story, but things actually worked out for the best. Looking back at that time, it was really a tough time because those were my dreams and aspirations to be an Apache helicopter pilot in the Army. And, you know, I failed at that, but then I tried something else. And 24 years later, I'm here, you know, with retired from the military and enjoying life.
That's awesome. So what happened? I mean, well, first of all, when did you get into reptiles? Was it when you were young? Was it before you got into the military? And then, you know, obviously, if you're in the military, you can't be keeping reptiles, right? So did you get out of them and come back? What's the story there?
Yep. So ever since I was little, I loved animals. And I was born in Ecuador, and I know I had a cat and a dog, and then I moved to the States. I've always had that passion for just animals, and I don't have that when I was young. I used to chase frogs type of story. Mine's a little bit different. I was in the military, and one of my supervisors, he was in the base honor guard, and he presented very, as I was young, he emulated somebody that I wanted to be like. And one day, you know, as we're working, and then, you know, we kind of had friends gathering. He's like, hey, like, I've got a boa constrictor. Like, you want to see? I was like, yeah, like, what, you have a snake? Never in my life did I know that you can keep like a boa constrictor as a pet. So he has this vision cage, and it's just a huge, like, first impression of a large snake. And ever since then, that was like that love for reptiles was born. This was back in 2013, and in 2013, he actually couldn't keep his snake anymore. So he asked me, hey, can you keep it? Can you take care of it? And I was like, yeah, sure. Like I'll do my research. About the care. And first snake is just that was given to me, and he gave me with the cage already. And then that's when I started learning about the care, the handling, the feeding. And at the time, there wasn't morphs around at all. There was the albino morphs at the time, I think, were just like the big thing. And then eventually, a couple of years, this is actually before 2013, a couple of years passed by, and then I ended up getting another albino boa. I got into like wanting to breed. So in the military, you can't have pets, right? But I was lucky to live outside of post. Like on post, you can't have reptiles, you can't have snakes. But if you live off post, you can definitely have reptiles, and you're free to own what you have. What the issue comes in if you are going to get deployed and you don't have somebody to care for them, then that's when it becomes a you have to rehome and this, that. And that's kind of what happened with me. I actually ended up getting selected to be a helicopter pilot. And, unfortunately at that time, I had to rehome the litter of albinos that I produced, the boa that he gave me, and then another Brazilian Bellum boa constrictor that I acquired from Rio Bravo Reptiles at the time. And that was when I pursued becoming a helicopter pilot. I understood like there's no balance to this. Like I can't, keep boas and then I get deployed. Who do I have to care for them? So that's kind of where in 2013 is when I rehomed those boas. Fast forward to when I retired from the military, I ended up getting back in because that passion was there, and I ended get up ball pythons. And initially I was like, oh, like there was something about the ball pythons that it was cool, but then I remembered having boas, and that's where I started getting back into boas, retired from the military, and I found that to be my passion.
How long were you in the military for?
24 years.
Holy smokes. Jeez, dude.
Yeah.
Wow. So what year did you enlist?
1998.
Wow. I was 8 years old.
I was 17. I actually, the recruiter told me, he's like, we're going to need your parents' signature that you're like, because you're not 18. Like, we're going to have her permission for you to join the military. So she thought I was going to Boy Scout. I was like, no, I'm going to the military.
So when did you come to America from Ecuador?
I came at 9 years old. I think that was about 1990.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. So, I mean, geez Louise. So 8 years in America and you just wanted to get into the military?
Well, actually, I wanted to be a Navy SEAL. That was my there's Navy SEAL posters in high school. And at the time I actually couldn't. I knew I couldn't because I've had a bad knee. I injured it in high school playing basketball. And after, as you're graduating high school, I think you get more exposure to recruiters. Ex-girlfriend at the time left the pamphlet of Air Force pamphlet in my locker, and I opened it up. I looked at Air Force. I was like, let me go try this out. But before that, I actually went by myself to the recruiter without my mom knowing. I went into the recruiter's office. The Army took me in. They welcomed me with open arms to join the Army. And what they say about joining the Army is true. They put jumping out of airplanes and parachuting out of planes like in front of your face. And as a impressionable young kid, I'm like, yeah, I want to do that. Like, let's go. And then after that, the kind of a bit funny story. So the recruiters, they gave me a test, passed the test. They were like, okay, we're going to take you to MEPS. Then MEPS, like I did my thing, or I scheduled MEPS. And then my mom, I told her, I was like, hey, I'm going to MEPS. And that's the time when that same day that I was supposed to go to MEPS, that's the time that I found the pamphlet of the Air Force pamphlet in my locker. And that same afternoon, I called the Air Force recruiter, and the Air Force recruiter was like, if you go to that, like, you're going to be in the Army. Like, that's it. Like, you're not going back. Like, there's no rewind button. And I was like, it's like, why don't you come over? He said, come over to my office. Let me offer you what we have. You can see what we have to offer you, and then you can make up your mind. Like, there's nothing saying you have to go with them this afternoon to go to MEPS. And I told my mom, I was like, hey, the Army recruiters are supposed to come pick me up that afternoon. And I told them, I was like, hey, like, I'm going to go talk to the Air Force. And they still wanted to show up at my house. And I was like, I'm leaving. So I ended up telling my mom, I was like, hey, if the Army shows up, like, tell them I went to the Air Force. They weren't too happy about that because they kind of had lined up and they did that work. But then when I showed up to the Air Force recruiter, I mean, it was like night and day. It was a different, I don't know if you call it sales pitch. I remember his name. It says Sergeant Evans at the time. And he sat me down. He's like, look, this is what things are going to look like. You go to maps, you go to basic training, after that, you get to your apartment. And then after that, and he just explained the whole process versus the Army was just kind of like, they grabbed me by the hand and just hugged me along the way and not knowing what to expect or what the next steps were. Still love the Army, by the way. Whoever's sees this, like the service has been great to me. But at that time, the best choice for me was to join the Air Force, and I ended up. The recruiter showed up to my mom's house, and she's like, she barely speak English. She's like, I don't know, like no English. He's not here. You want coffee?
Wow. What an American story.
Yeah, man. That was I think 17 years old. 17 years old, and I decided this is my calling.
That's wild. And so I'm assuming they were coming to pick you up because you probably couldn't even drive yet.
No, because when they take you to MEPS, like you stay there overnight.
Oh, okay.
And that's where they in-process you. They'll have you sign paperwork. They'll do all the physical exams, and then they'll you basically sign that dotted line that you're committing for 4 years, I think at the time.
So you went in pre 9/11, and
Yes.
then I mean you went through all of that. You went through everything. I mean, that was 24 years in. That's incredible. So how long ago did you get out of the military?
2021. No,
Wow.
wait, I'm sorry. 2022 is when I got out.
That's wild.
Yep.
Jeez. Now, what happened with being a helicopter pilot? That didn't pan out?
Yeah. So, after being in the Air Force for 10 years, actually, like the path of me becoming a helicopter pilot, I feel it's important to share this story because the way it happened, I was coming to an end of my time with the Air Force Honor Guard, and I was driving, and I either had a choice. I said I could go back to being a cook, and I couldn't be in. This is in the Washington D.C. area, so I couldn't stay in the Air Force Honor Guard, which I did drill team there. And I was just driving to work one day, and I was like, I got to make a decision as to what I want to pursue. I said, I need a sign, like God, like I need a sign, like what do I need to do? And as soon as I stopped saying that, I looked to my left, and the two Marine helicopters pitched up their nose and did a quick stop. And to me, I took that as a sign, like that's my role. That's what I need to pursue. And that was where the dream was born, to become a helicopter pilot. Now, the love for the Apache came afterwards. And that was a whole entire 4-year process for me because going from the Air Force to the Army, one, it's not normal for somebody to do that. It's actually the opposite. They go from the Army to the Air Force. So people always ask me, why did you go from the Air Force to the Army? I say, they have Apaches and I could be a pilot. So the whole, becoming a pilot in the Army, great experience. It's like, I wish I could go back and rewind and do everything over again. But what transpired there is, after I finished all the preliminary training. So before you get to fly an Apache, you have to go through Dunker, you have to go through academics, you have to fly the TH-67, and then graduate the basic course before you go into the advanced course. And all this is a fire hose effect, which they pretty much, you have this amount of time to learn this amount of material, and it's keep up or shut up or get out, or, keep up. Like, you don't have a choice. So going along those that process, I successfully graduated from the primary course before we go into advanced. I graduated third in my class. The first two people that were um, the first and second rating, because they rate you. The first two were actually rated commercial pilots, and for me, I was able to get third in that class, so I was able to pick the helicopter that I want. And then the advanced course itself, you know, I attribute me not so to become a helicopter pilot, and once you're in the Apache, there's evaluations, and in those evaluations, you have to pass each one. So it's a check flight, and they basically test, hey, this is the first 2 weeks, and this is what you're supposed to be at in 2 weeks. I put so much pressure on myself because I've reached that dream of being a pilot that I was scared to make a mistake.
Mm.
And that's what I actually ended up attributing me not being able to keep up with. I was behind the aircraft. So I was reacting to the aircraft rather than telling the aircraft how to fly.
Mm.
So my life consisted of wake up, study, drive, get to class, study, go to academics, take tests, lunch break, study, go to flight school. This is where like the beginning of the day, it's all academics. Then the rest of the half of the afternoon is going to be flying the actual pilot, the helicopter. And then you go and then you study and then you fly the helicopter and then you get off work and you go home and then you study some more. Jeez. And then you sleep. I did that because I was so afraid to fail. My life basically revolved around that was my schedule for 7 days straight. And I didn't give my brain a chance to like relax. I had no fun, no activities, no going out. It's just boom, boom, boom. And, through that process, the people that I spoke to, because they support you, they want you to pass. And they explain like, hey, what's there are things at home. It's like, what's your schedule looking like? And I explained to them, it's like, this is my life. And they're like, it's like, you have to find the time to reset your brain. You cannot continue to you're not a machine. And by that time, it was already like, I was supposed to get an additional 5 hours, and everybody that I spoke to was like, yeah, like you've done good. Like you just need an additional 5 hours. But as we went up the decision chain of command to say, hey, like this is, they determine if you're going to get an additional 5 hours to check ride, right? It just wasn't meant to be. Like there's two commanders that said no. And part of that, there's many factors, right? There's like, I had two of the toughest IPs in the Apache course. And not to say like I take full responsibility, like, hey, like I identified like this is what happened that caused me to not be where I needed to be.
What's an IP?
Instructor pilot.
Okay.
And then that basically, when somebody fails, I think you could kind of say like point fingers and like blame this, but like I identified there's so many factors in flight school. One of the factors was like, as you go down this pipeline of students, there's a backlog, and this backlog gets filled up with people, and now you have to wait, and then they have to plug in two students that basically went back. Well, at the time, the commanding general was like, hey, like we have to reduce the number of people that are waiting. So I think amongst that was kind of like the driving force between somebody, the orders of that general be like, hey, like we have to reduce those numbers. I was one of those casualties that didn't end up continuing.
And before you gave up your reptiles before entering this program, or were you still keeping them? And then, I mean, it sounds like you didn't have time for anything but what you were doing.
Yeah, this was way before. This was part of the reason why I gave up my reptiles, was because I was following my dream to be an Apache pilot.
Yeah. That's crazy. So that didn't pan out. And
No,
what year was this about? That, I mean, you put all that effort into it, and
I think it's about 2011,
okay.
2011. And at the time, I didn't know why it happened. It was a tough time for me after working so hard. We're talking about 6 years of dedication and dream and
Jeez.
reaching that dream. It all happened for a reason. It's like, I look back at it now, and it's made me who I am now, because that tough time in my life that put me in a place where, depressed, and why is this happening? And at the moment, you don't recognize that the universe, or whoever, you believe that's guiding you, or anyways, it basically lined me up for something better, like a better job. And
Mm.
in that process, I met, there's a SERE school. They take you to SERE school. It's survival, evasion, rescue, and escape. And one of the um one
I've
of
heard
the
horror stories about it from friends.
one of the people that was there, he told me, and he's like, "Hey, Washington," is like, "You don't know, but like the job that you currently," because I had to find a different job, which was electronic warfare. And he's like, "The job of electronic warfare." He asked me, like, "Why did you want to be an Apache pilot?" And I said, "Because I want to protect the soldiers in the ground. Like, this is something that I feel a strong passion for." He was like, "You don't know it now, but you're going to understand that because of your desire to protect the soldiers in the ground in the job of electronic warfare, you're going to be protecting a lot more than an Apache pilot, because
Mm.
you're dealing with effects that impact like bigger areas of operation. So you're going to be protecting, and electronic warfare is a completely different subject that, yeah, it's pretty cool once you learn about what it does, jamming, frequencies, radios, all that stuff. Like, I
Yeah.
understand now why that lined up, like that path lined up for me.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Now, when did you end up coming back to keeping snakes? When were you able to fit that back into your life? Was it after you retired?
Yes. Yes. At the time of my retirement, I decided, I was actually going to visit my mom, and I stopped by a reptile store, and I saw a lucid ball python, blue-eyed lucid, and the the blue-eyed lucid actually like caught my eye, and I decided to like get it, and I ended up getting back into reptiles.
Nice. Now the blue-eyed Lucies, the don't they do they have issues sometimes?
Man, so when it comes to ball pythons, I'm definitely not the expert. I am the idiot.
Yeah, you just saw a cool snake and went for it, because they caught my eye too. I was like, man, that's so cool. Pure white with blue eyes and everything, and but yeah, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I'm just totally talking out my ass right now, but I could have
No, no.
swore that they
So
they carry like problems with that genetic.
from my experience, I it's been a normal snake. There hasn't been any issues
Yeah.
that I've noticed. It's been growing healthy. It actually became my wife's snake.
Oh, nice.
She's just totally afraid of reptiles and like lizards, snakes, and she didn't want anything to do with them. But somewhere, somehow, she ended up like getting into like ball pythons, and she just that's her ball python.
Yeah. So how did you end up getting into boas from ball pythons?
So from ball pythons, there wasn't that passion. There wasn't that passion that actually I felt with a boa constrictor, I have this, I don't know, I can't describe it. It just, I got the ball pythons and I enjoyed it, but there's something about the boa constrictors that attracted me to them that basically gave me, I don't know, it's just I'm drawn to them.
Yeah.
Yeah. And from there, this is 3, 4 years ago, actually, um, when it comes to morphs, right? I can try to learn about ball pythons and like all these names, and it's just not registering. But I picked up like all the genetics, the care I already had experience. But at the time, from going to only having albinos to the different morphs of boa constrictors, it just was easily digested by my brain. It just, and I think that's where that passion comes in, where I'm able to learn about the genetics, and it wasn't a hard subject to try to learn. It just, it aligned with me really well. And that's where I think, to answer your question, just gravitated towards the boa constrictors versus the ball pythons.
Nice. So how many boas do you have now?
Oh, man, we're over 100.
Jeez, that's a lot of boas. I don't even, so obviously you have to be keeping in racks, right? Like you can't be keeping them in cages with 100 boas. That would take a warehouse.
Yes, yes, definitely keeping them in racks.
Wow, 100.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the food bill is that's mind-boggling.
Yes, yes, definitely. It's blessed to be retired from the military, and right now, like, just the hard work that I've put in for those 24 years, and I do have an additional job to being retired, so that's helped me maintain that hobby passion. So for me, it's not even about, like, for me, it's not the money. It's like it is a consideration, but I enjoy it so much that it doesn't even, affect me. I'm still eating well. I don't know if you can tell. Like,
That's awesome. So, walk me through, like your daily routine with keeping 100 boas. Like, what does that look like? I mean, that's I have like I don't know, like 20 snakes, and it takes a lot of work, in addition to my regular job and family and everything.
yeah. So to keep 100 boas, well, basically my day is in the morning, um, before walking dogs. It's just going in and just looking at all the racks, and then checking to see if there's any droppings, that need to be cleaned up, any cages, and then after that, make sure like all the water levels are good. Replace water bowls. I've got a system pretty much packed down where it probably takes you about 30 minutes to look through everyone in the morning, and then that process is repeated in the afternoon, and then between morning and afternoon checks, then um, it's just daily life of you know doing social media, um, going to work. Right now, I'm actually in the recovery phase. I had a total knee replacement, so I'm in the rehab process of this, and going to the gym, trying to get my. I don't think I've shared this with you. Like, I had a total of 8 knee surgeries in the 24 years of the military. So all those surgeries through the military have caught up with me to where now I'm doing some self care in between. The checking on the boa constrictors, make sure is not just making sure that, hey, they're dirty. You also want to inspect them, like, so not inspect them like thoroughly, but just look at each one of them, make sure that there's nothing off. They don't have anything growing or any. Try to identify any potential issues that they might be having, versus, what do you call it? Like catching it too late.
Yeah.
So it's just develop into a good routine. Some days are longer than others. Some days it turns into a 4 hour, like on feeding day, it's probably like an entire, I don't know, day event, versus, but I've actually learned to spread it out through different days. I used to do it all at once, and then now I'm like, okay, let me try to space them out to that way. Um, there there's a balance.
Now, how do you change your waters? Is that a 1 day event, or are you breaking that up too, where it's okay, I do this section on Monday and this section on Wednesday and this section on Friday, or is it just one shot?
Nope. I actually have a system where say this rack's been, then I have to go to the next rack, and I know this rack's been done. So then it's just a certain section at a time where you clean the water bowls and then refresh the water bowls. It doesn't go longer than like 3 days without getting fresh water in each one of those bowls.
How do you clean your bowls?
So I have a sink that I've actually installed in my reptile room, and I have what is it called? The actual spray. It's from Reptile Basics.
Mm,
I don't know the name. I know some people use F10. I also use diluted bleach where I spray them, I soak them. They're ceramic bowls. I found that to be for me, like they stay clean. I'm able to clean them. And I soak them and then I wash them by hand, all 100 and plus of them, and with a sponge, and then I put them to dry.
nice.
Yeah.
So, yeah, how often are you doing shows? Is that the one of the primary ways that you move snakes, or are you doing Morph Market or a website?
Yep. So I was doing shows, and then because of the knee surgery, I've put that in the until probably next year to really start going back out there. I think the reptile shows are a good way to meet people. For me, it's been with the market right now. My experience has been sales have decreased. And then Morph Market, it's been a good avenue for marketing and selling boas. But definitely, I think going into next year is going to be line up more shows, bigger shows, because I found, me and the wife, she helps me out a lot. 3 hour has been we've determined a 3 hour drive is our max in order for us to not be completely worn out. But I think definitely those shows is one avenue because you get to meet people. They might not buy right away, but I think they getting to meet, the individual, getting to see them again at a reptile show actually helps them develop that confidence and like, man, like, because buying a reptile, not only I found that it comes from, the boas can sell themselves, but they're also buying the breeder behind it, like the support, the questions that might come up. And I think that's where getting out to shows really helps.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Especially if you're buying like a higher end morph, you kind of want to have a support system in your breeder and sort of a friendship there where you can check in and run things by them and things like that.
Yep. I definitely believe strongly in that customer support. I've had a detailing business back in Hawaii as one of my entrepreneurship side of things, where I developed a good, strong sense of customer service, where you have to make yourself available and answer those questions timely, try to respond to messages, and find a good medium to where you keep up with that demand of like the questions that are coming in and being able to answer those in a timely manner.
Yeah, absolutely. So where are you getting a lot of your questions from? Are they coming from Morph Market and Facebook and Instagram and you're just kind of getting input from all different directions?
It's a balance that I think mainly the channels that questions have come in is Instagram. I do have a website, but no questions have come up through there. There is an option in my website that you can click and directly message. And then in Morph Market too, there is another message function that if you look at the logo, there's a little messaging icon. You can click messages where you don't have to inquire about an animal or boa or any animal. Just and then you can directly message the seller. I don't think a lot of people, and maybe misspeaking here, but I don't know if a lot of people know that function in Morph Market. That I think I've used it, but that's one way also. So I've got different avenues, and they're all open channels, and also my phone's up there. I think available for anybody to reach out. I had one person this Friday actually reach out because he had a boa that he's concerned about being a bit aggressive. He's had ball pythons. We talked for a good 30 minutes just for me to kind of give him some tips as to the care, the handling, because he is concerned about the boa. Boas have this stigma that they are aggressive and they get mean, and my experience with them is far from that. Sometimes I think maybe I'm a boa whisperer because I actually rehomed a boa constrictor Aztec that the lady was like, hey, like this boa is striking at the glass and we just want to find a home for it. So I was like, okay, like let me go check out and I can give you some tips. And if you really feel that you want to rehome it, like I'll take them. So went over to his house. It was an adult boa. And then they had the big dogs, Dalmatians. No, that's the spotty ones. The Great Danes.
Great Dane.
Yep. So the Great Dane, the face is right by the glass. And I was like, this is most likely your cause. But she felt strongly, or the couple felt strongly that they wanted to rehome it. So I was like, okay. I reached in there. They didn't seem aggressive at all. And I was like, okay, like I took him. After that, I never saw an ounce of aggression on that boa at all. This other boa I ended up buying from Jay Benitez. He told me that she was the devil. And because of that initial like warning from him, I guess you could say, or maybe that heads up, like she's feisty. I was cautious, but to this day, I have yet to see her show any type of aggression. I've told him, I was like, are you sure that this is the devil? Because I haven't seen it. And I don't know. I think, having that experience, that's where I gave him some tips is like, handle them. It's a young boa, so make sure that you're handling them. Make sure you kind of read their body language before you stick your hand in there. That's important because he said that the boa hissed at him when he lifted up the hide. And then I was like, yeah, I'll probably hiss at you too if you lifted up the roof of my home. So
yeah, while you're in bed.
Yeah. So, I'm definitely there for that support to answer those questions in any channels. If anybody wants to reach out and, have questions about care. And it's not for me. It's more about the care of the animal too. For me, it's not about sales. You don't have to buy a boa for me. I want to make sure that, hey, these animals are being cared for. So it just doesn't have to be about sales. It could be about genetics, care, tips. I found like my system. One of the things that you asked me earlier, humidity, right? So how do you keep humidity in an entire bedroom or room, like almost a facility full of boas? Well, I ended up getting a humidifier. And here recently, I knew with the humidifier, when it's wintertime, like the humidity basically like drops because you're heating inside of your house. So I noticed that my humidifier, I'm starting to refill it every other day. Like, and this is a 5-gallon humidifier.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, like one, you could miss it, right? If you're not like with everything else that you do on a daily basis, you might overlook that. So I decided to look into how to keep it refilled. So one of the things I did, and this is one of the things I'm working on, is putting a YouTube channel. I recorded myself and tried to put together a video. I installed a valve in this humidifier where it's an automatic top off valve from Amazon, about $9. Drilled a hole, and I have a Rode 11-stage filter for the boas, and I basically tapped into that that line, and now my humidifier is constantly staying topped off.
Wow.
So the only thing that I need to do, the room stays at a 65 to 70% humidity, and the only thing I have to remember, which is just on a schedule, is to every 2 to 3 weeks make sure that I go in, disinfect it, clean it, because it does create that buildup inside of that humidifier. It gets gunky. So I found the right one to be able to make those daily task or monthly task a little bit easier. But I'll have to post that on YouTube. I'm very proud of that system I got.
Yeah, that's awesome. Anything that you can do to automate when keeping snakes, it makes life so much easier.
That's the word I was looking for. Automated.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So what what brought you, like, are you just into morph boas, or are you into locality boas? Are you into any pythons or anything like that, or is it just morph boas? Is that what is that the apple of your eye?
That is the apple of my eye. But something else has recently caught my eye, which is like reticulated pythons.
Oh, really?
I did. I ended up getting one from Lee from Serpentology, and I just fell in love with this orange ghost stripe reticulated python that me and him are very good friends. So yeah. So but boas and morphs of boas, it's where I found that passion to be.
So when a customer comes to you and they're looking to get a morph boa, what are you how are you educating them as far as the size that the animal will get to be, and then caging requirements? Like what do you recommend that they do if they're getting a baby, and what to expect long term?
Yep. So I think just answer your question. So the it depends on the customer. So sometimes I think you have an experienced customer that doesn't ask any about like the sizing care requirements, and you
Sure.
have kind of like that entry level customer that um, they ask the question as to the caging requirements, and then this has been at shows that I tell them like this is if this is your only boa that you're going to keep, like this is my suggested caging requirements for this boa. And I ask them about their space, where they planning to keep it at. If they plan, I recommend that they do use a humidifier in their area, because one of the things I think that people end up having issues with as far as shedding is because that humidity, with a daily, if you're not keeping up with that daily misting, which keeps that humidity level where it needs to be, then that's where it causes problems. And then people kind of would be like, what's going on? And because it's not a maintained, such as an automated system that I like, for me, it doesn't have to be a huge humidifier. It could just be a small one, like located somewhere near that enclosure, just to
Hmm.
keep that air in the room. And then I give them the expectation of, depending on the animal as well. I'll be like I've had a boa constrictor that is 6 years old, and she's 6.5 feet to 7 feet, and she's about 20 pounds, 25 pounds thick, nice, big old snake. And then I have a 9-year-old boa constrictor that is 5.5 feet, maybe six, and she's about 12 pounds, maybe around there.
Yeah.
Not overly huge. And that comes from the genetics. So not all boa constrictors are going to be, you know, it's going to come down to genetics, and asking those questions of breeders of what the expectation is for this for this boa, of how big they're going to get. And one of the key things that I mentioned to them is it's dependent on how you feed them. And I know that
Mm.
there's different practices out there. So there's the slow grown method, and then there's just they feed them as regularly. I've made the decision, to slow grow my boas, because I've done my research, and I don't say like anybody else's practice is wrong, or it's just a different method. And my reasoning was because of the size as they continue to grow when they're small, is you're keeping them not underfed, because I also ensure that they're keeping their body like look like they were supposed to, breath shape with muscular, not skinny and underfed. But I found that as I was doing this reading, that it says as you're growing and the boas are growing, they actually end up, if you feed them too often, too fast, then their bodies get long, but their internal organs are not keeping up with how big they are. And that's where I was like, that's key. And then you can also cause overweight boas, which then, just like any human being, if you're overweight, you're going to have health issues. So then, I explained to them that portion of, like, depending on what boa you're getting, like if you're getting like a baby or juvenile, like, this is my recommendations for feeding. This is my regimen, what's kept my boas healthy, and the body structure that it's supposed to be. So as far as managing size, because I think depending on which route they decide to take, they can possibly overfeed their boas. But then I tell them, if you have questions, make sure you reach out to me or reach out to those, and then do your research, and then make an educated, informed choice as to like how you're going to feed your boas, because there's a lot of information online. The information I'm putting out there, some people might disagree with it, some people might agree with it, and I think you're gonna have to read and do your own diligence to be like, what's the best choice? What's going to work best for the care of my animal?
So you kind of what do you consider slow growing? What does that feeding routine look like?
So, for example, for a baby boa constrictor, it's going to be every 7 days, and then as they continue to get into, let's say a bigger, let's say 1 year, their feeding is going to be reduced to every 10 to 14 days. And then as they get bigger, they're going to be on every 14 days. And then as they get adults, it'll be like twice a month, because the prey items get bigger. They're going to need time to digest. So my boas, the adult boas are getting fed twice, and not a huge like meal. It's actually relatively proportionate. They're just a slight noticeable lump in when they eat, and that's for my adult boas, where I keep them at twice a month feedings.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
as
about
they grow, they
every
get
2 weeks. And then do you is there like being a breeder, is there a point in time where you cut them off from food to do you food cycle them? Are you cycling their temperatures? Like, how do you get them ready to breed?
So for here where I'm at in Virginia, the setup that I have, it's automated, where right now with the temperature dropping in here in Virginia, it's already generating that drop in temperature, where now I have to be conscious of the heating that I'm putting into my home. So as I raise the heating, I have to go and adjust my thermostats to keep that temperature where it needs to be, because during that temperature change of fluctuation, that's going to throw off those thermostats. So I'm conscious of that temperature change and that drop in order to start that natural weather temperature change.
Sure.
So then for breeding purposes, yes, like I've done my own, let's say, the way I'm doing it is I've already started pairing my boas in July. And I know that there's practices where they pair them up in November, going into the breeding cycle. See, my thought process when I go into the breeding is like, I want to make sure that when I pair my boas, that they're not going to be fighting in there. Like, not that they do, but that they're, cohabitating properly.
Sure.
And then,
well, and when you say fighting, they could just be competing for space or heat, right?
Yes. Yeah. And then, I monitor them, that the female is perceptive to the male, and so far I've noticed like they enjoy having that company. Like, I've seen their behavior, they're nested up together, and that to me tells me, okay, like these two boas are good. I can trust them to be together. And then when the breeding cycle comes in, then they're already accustomed to each other. Then the male, as the temperature drops and the female starts to release those hormones, then the male is going to be perceptive to start that breeding. One of the reasons I started doing that is because I was able to breed and have a litter of boas in January. They were born in January, and I paired her in July. Healthy, all no slugs, and one of the things that I was like, okay, that I've also read the boa constrictor manual, where it says there's other breeders that do practice breeding off season, and it's all dependent on, hey, you got to have a healthy animal, a happy animal, space requirements, and then be able to, like, a boa that's sick is not going to breed. A boa that's not happy is not going to be perceptive to breeding. So taking into account, like, given that whole year, like me pairing them in July, like I found that I'm not missing out on that, possibly putting in a male where the female was perceptive to him in September, and then I didn't pair her up until November, and then now I have slugs because she, went through that process earlier.
Mm,
Um, yeah.
okay. What so when selling somebody a boa, what are you telling them the ideal cage size is?
So the ideal cage size that I tell them is going to be the what's the measurement for this one? The 4 by 5. Is that, and then the 12 foot 12 inches, 12 to
Uh-huh.
13 inches in height.
Okay.
Yeah.
So more ground space, so that this is like the size tubs that you keep your breeders in.
Right. Yeah. No, I have vision cages. So
Oh, okay.
I have some vision cages that are actually like larger. They're
Yeah, yeah.
taller, and those were the ones that I was able to find with in the Morph market at a good deal. And then I do have the Reptile basic ones. Is it Reptile basics? No, Vivarium electronic ones that I use, that I have the double sliding doors, or you can open up those doors.
Yeah. Nice. And so obviously the bigger they are, obviously the larger cage they need, and
Mhm.
more space to move around and everything.
Mhm.
So what morphs like carry what like issues with them? Like we have carpet pythons that, if you get the jag morph, they could have the wobble and things like that. Are there any morphs that carry any issues like that with them in boa constrictors, or are there certain gene combinations that can be lethal that you have to watch out for when you're pairing or breeding?
Yep. So the one morph that comes to mind, the scoria, is the one that's been known to carry a wobble. And I think
Mm,
now, um, with breeders, I don't have any myself, so I haven't experienced that. One of the one of the hesitations of getting a scoria has been because of that wobble, known wobble. But speaking with breeders that have produced, reputable breeders, they've told me, hey, like this doesn't have a wobble. So I've been more open to getting one for myself, but I haven't done that yet. But that is one of the off the top of my head, one of the morphs um, that could have that um, health concerns. As far as any breeding concerns, or something you don't want to pair together, is going to be jungle to jungle, because that's going to create a super jungle, and those are um, known to have not being not
failure
being
to thrive, is it like a lethal combination?
lethal combination. But there's been people that have actually had, and I don't know that off the top of my head, that they've posted, and I follow one of the Facebook groups, that they bred a super jungle successfully. Um, Beautiful animals, but right now they do have that. Um, what do you call it? Like, they can't breed. Like, they're not fertile. That's the word I'm
Oh,
looking
okay.
for.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
The males are not fertile. I haven't tried that myself. I do have a super jungle. I decided to get the super jungle because I wanted to experience for myself, like, okay, what are the health complications? Just kind of what's the information that's out on the internet versus like what's reality. So
Mhm.
far, my experience with the super jungle is not getting as big as a steadily normal boa, that a different morph. Um, and I'm monitoring him to see like how he's doing, but I do notice there's a slow growth to him.
Mm.
Um, and then the other lethal combinations, which I know off the top of my head, would be the Aztec to Aztec to lethal combination, and Motley to Motley lethal combination. If and those are more prevalent, that I've seen more people really stay away from those.
Do you think that it's like really irresponsible to try to make like a super motley and breed two motleys together if it's going to result in just animals that aren't viable and they just die?
Yes, yes. The the known experience with people, and the people that share that experiences like, hey, I ended up buying a super motley, and there's one Instagram person that I know that they expect the expectation is they're not going to live past 2 years.
Mm.
And I just was like this individual got them like because she wants to care for them, like with the expectation of that. But definitely knowing that that is a lethal combination, that's to me that's unethical to breed those morphs.
Yeah. What's the difference between, saying that you have a retic now, right? You have one in that you're caring for.
Mhm.
What's the difference between keeping a retic and a boa, like between growth rate and food consumption and everything? Like what are some things that really stand out between those two?
Oh, so let me see. Keeping a retic, there's definitely a lot more maintenance with a retic versus a boa. The retics go to the bathroom more often, so I find myself changing out their enclosure and cleaning it up because of their urates versus like a poop. Like they don't poop as often, but they definitely like stay hydrated. So that's definitely a noticeable difference. Then the other one, as far as feeding, the the feeding is I haven't noticed any different. In the growth rate, I don't see, when you have a like an animal and you see it every day, like you don't notice that change. But
Hmm.
like when my wife sees it, she's like, "Oh wow, it's gotten bigger." And like it just looks exactly the same to me. So
Yeah, yeah.
I'm not noticing it because I'm constantly seeing it. Maybe 2 years from now, I'm not trying to grow a super huge. I'm feeding the recommended size prey slash the feeding guidelines for retics in order to keep them healthy and not, overgrow them or try to grow them just to breed them. Like to me right now, they're just pets. Potentially in the future, like I do have considered, like I want to have a these like baby retics, maybe just to have them once. Um, but any other differences? Obviously, the caging requirements definitely a bigger cage, a bigger enclosure for them.
Yeah, long term, what size enclosure do you think that you're going to be keeping the retic in?
Oh man,
Because it's the
that's
mainland, right? So that's
yeah.
that's going to get pretty big.
Yeah, so that my plan is to basically like build a bigger, taller enclosure, just like in this office space that I have. I'm going to make sure that it has the space necessary, like in order for them to have their cooling side, their hot side, and a climbing area. So I'm also thinking about there's a storage space upstairs that I'm thinking about eventually um, selling a lot of the stuff that I've collected, and
Yeah.
then making that room into an expansion, which I can definitely put bigger size enclosures for them.
Nice. Yeah, that's they kind of, I mean, yeah, getting one of those big retics, they definitely require a lot of space. That's got to be daunting, but it sounds like you have space that you can expand into,
Mhm.
and it would be, I mean, it would be a fun thing too if you have the space and you can expand. It would be fun to build an enclosure and go all out.
Yep, that is one of the plans as I as progress because I've just been here in Virginia for about a year. Yeah, like a little bit over a year, and with moving, getting settled in, organizing the home, make sure that I have my routine for the boas, and then the other part is um, once I'm able to clear up that storage space, there's a couple of different options that I think eventually I'll go into put in basically go moving into the garage or possibly going in expanding into that storage room upstairs. The garage would be nice because it's I could be able to fit everything that I need, which like the racks and also bigger enclosures, and then um, what do you call it? The freezer, because right now there's
Mm.
things are upstairs and there's also in the garage, and there's a freezer in the garage, so I'd like to maybe consolidate everything. But with that, it's going to be building you know insulated space in order to maintain the same thing that I'm able to keep in that upstairs room. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I have things in automated slash. I can check the temperature upstairs in my room with an app. I'm thinking about getting the humidifier that's able to adjust it with an app, just to have those things to be able to monitor them, without having to go upstairs or.
Yeah, I got a Govee smart humidifier.
Mhm.
And so I have some of the temperature and humidity sensors in the room, so it can keep the humidity right at like 55% is what I like to have my ambient in the room, and then I'll actually mist inside the enclosures as well. And
And
I've had pretty good success with that.
what do you have? What do you
Eh,
keep?
oh man, all sorts of stuff. I have a couple morph boas. I have a like a pastel. I guess the actual morph is Orange Gasm, which is just like the worst morph name to me. I can't tell my kids what the morph is. But yeah, I have her, and she's beautiful, and what I really like about her and what I find to be really cool is the way her color actually changes. If she's, I don't know what exactly causes it. I've noticed though that she's darker when she seems to be cooler, if she's hanging out on the cool end. And then after she feeds and she's like directly under the basking spot and like getting under the UV light and everything, she turns like really light gray with oranges mixed in and everything, and just a really beautiful color. And then I have an IMG Motley as well, male, and he's just the coolest thing ever because he's just, I mean, just inky black. His eyes are black orbs, and just a wild looking animal. And I have a trio of Argentine boas. A pair is just babies; they were just born this year, and then I have a 3-year-old girl. Reverse trio of Timor pythons, and then a bunch of carpet pythons. I think I'm up to 2.3 jungles and Papuan carpet, and I've got a trio of spotted pythons. I have one here and a pair coming from Ryan Young.
Mhm.
So kind of and a couple ball pythons too. Sort of a very eclectic, diverse, collection. But I kind of see things and then research them, and the Timor pythons were a big one for me, where despite their reputation, I got them anyway. Their reputation to piss all over you every time you touch them.
Has that lived up to?
Yeah. They're holding true to that. I mean, if you're holding them constantly, it doesn't happen. But yeah, even they just they're leaky. They're leaky snakes. It's it's frustrating. I
Yeah.
hope that as they get older, they'll get more confident and more comfortable with me as time goes on. But it is what it is too. I had fair warning that
Mhm.
that's what they are as an animal. So yeah, it is what
Is
it is.
it a reaction? I know nothing about the Timor, but is it more of a defense mechanism that they trigger, or what triggers them to do that?
Yeah, they're terrified. They're just
Oh.
they're just terrified. They're so you take them out, and I try to get them out of their cage and away from it as fast as possible. As soon as
Mhm.
they're out and away, they calm down. All of a sudden, I mean, I could sit there and work at my computer for an hour and just hold one in my hand, and they're totally content, and they're not defensive, and they have no interest in getting away. I can touch them on the head,
Mhm.
just totally content. But it's that moment of taking them out of the cage that it's like they think they're being picked up by an eagle or some bird of prey or
Oh.
something, and and where they come from, I'm sure that they're dealing with Komodo dragons and other things, so they need to sort of have that response built into them, so it's just kind of what they are as an animal. unfortunately. But mine are captive born and bred by Ryan Young, all three of them. So I'm hopeful that if I can produce babies from them one day, and get further and further, into captive bred animals, that'll eventually, sort of calm down, and they'll be better, more handleable pets.
Yeah.
But again, I'm not holding my breath. They are what they are. If I want something, if I want to pull out a snake that wants to come out of its cage and seems to want to interact with me, I can open up my Argentine boa's cage, and that's what she wants to do. She wants to come right out, and I could walk around the house and do chores with her around my neck, and she's completely content with it. So it is what it is. It's different animals. It's funny you said the thing about the boas and the retics going to the bathroom. The Timors are Malayo pythons, so they're related to the retics. I'm in Florida, so I can't have a retic. But yeah, I mean they eat and they digest so quickly and defecate usually within 2 or 3 days after eating, whereas the boas, it's like they seem to go forever between feeding and defecating. It's wild how long it takes, and I never know when it's going to be. It's like it has to be the smell test, and especially with the enclosures the way I have them, they'll go behind some foliage or under a hide or something like that and defecates, but you can definitely smell it when it happens.
Yeah.
So yeah, they're cool. I love boas. I mean, I really do. If I could only have one snake, it would probably be some sort of a boa, probably an Argentine. I really like the Argentine boas, but they make a great, you can just take them out and hold them, which is awesome. But I don't know. I'm pretty torn. The carpet pythons are awesome too. I do love my carpets.
Yeah, the carpet pythons, are those the ones that are like yellow and black?
Yeah, those are the jungle carpets. Yeah, and I started off with a Papuan carpet from Riley, and I really love the vivid colors on him, especially when he fires up. He gets very orangey and yellowy, and he's got like a just awesome color palette, and then I started going down the dark path of jungle carpet pythons, and now I'm just a junkie and always trying to find the next best jungle to and just thinking about future pairings and everything.
It sounds like you got a nice variety of not just like exclusivity of this is what I keep, but like you mentioned a bunch of different varieties of snakes. You thinking about getting into anything else?
Yeah, I mean, something I would like to have down the road would be Halmahera scrub pythons. That's something I would like to have down the road, but I would need more space. I'm maxed out on space in the house. We have 2 kids, so they occupy spare bedrooms, so it's like my office, and then my wife was cool enough that I was able to expand into the dining room area. So that was that'll be where sort of all my Australian animals are at, and I do plan on getting some Brettles pythons and diamond pythons, but those I want to keep fully outdoors year round.
Nice.
Yeah.
Earlier you mentioned about the boas and like the timing of things, and I started paying attention as to like when they will defecate. I don't have a problem because I'm always checking them. So like I smell it, and there's always one that goes every day. So there's not a day that they miss. So the after feeding though, I did find, I think the 11-day mark is when they'll pass. And then I think it all maybe has to do also with the feeding regimen, but I found that about 11 to 14 days is where they're digested and past their meal. Yeah, I don't know. let me know if that's what you found next time you feed them, and then see if that's about the timing that yours goes well.
Yeah, I need to document it. I do track my feedings. I should track that just to try to get a better idea of it. My Argentine female, I mean, I heard her go and I was like, I'll give her a little bit, make sure she's done, and cleaned everything up. And then she went again,
Mhm.
like maybe 4 hours later. And I'm like, geez, what is going on here? But yeah, it's, do you, I've heard people say that you kind of wait for them to like start cruising their enclosure and then defecate, and then that's when a lot of people will feed. Do you subscribe to that, or do you just feed based on your schedule? Like, okay, this is an animal that's 2 years old, so every 2 weeks. I mean, because I don't do that. I feed every 2 weeks. Like once my boas are over a year old, then I go to every 2 weeks. Now the Argentines are a little bit different because they're more like a true red tail, from what I've been told. So I'm actually, even though they're under a year old, I'm feeding them every 2 weeks right now, because I did have issues with regurgitation, and I think I might have just been feeding them too quickly, and so it was like almost fully digested and just a lot of hair, and so that was like a red flag. Okay, I'm just giving these animals too much food. I need to back off a little bit. And, I think each one of them out of that pair regurgitated once. And so I just backed off, gave them space, and everybody told me like they're not morph boas, they're a little bit more sensitive. It takes more time for them to get going and get well established that way.
Yeah, no, I the same thing. I feed them on a schedule, not to not monitor like when they defecate, because I clean them, so they try to log when they poop, and then, oh, I got to feed this one. It'd probably be impossible.
Yeah, yeah.
Possible, but very time consuming. A lot of organization to like try to get that. So it's all based on the timing, and their age.
Yeah. What's your biggest boa? How big is your biggest boa?
That would be the female Aztec, sharp Aztec that I have, and she's the one I think I got him from Peter, from Motion Reptiles, and I got to weigh her again, probably 20-25 pounds.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a big girl.
Yeah, she's super nice. There's a picture. No, I have to post a picture of her. But she's definitely. And one of the things that I noticed too with the genetics of these animals, that's what made me say like, hey, like I had babies from her and babies from an earlier breeding, and her babies are the same size of an earlier breeding. So definitely is her genetics have passed. And their babies are going to be just as big as her. So, and if, when I do sell to somebody those specific babies, I would let them know, hey, the expectation because of the genetics of the mom, this is going to be a bigger, thicker boa versus the ones that I've produced. There was the RC Pastel that I produced, 50% had blood, and they're on the smaller side. And when you compare the two, you think like, oh, these two were born the same age. They're actually starting to pass the ones that were born earlier. Wow. And same feeding regimen too. There's no like feeding them extra or yeah, they're getting to that point where they're about the same size.
Wow. What's your favorite morph?
I love a labyrinth. That's like my go-to. And then, I mean, specifically more would be the, what is the name of this? I can't think of it right now, but it's the labyrinth.
Yeah. The scorias are so beautiful. And, and when I was researching them, I saw that they could potentially have some neurological issues and things like that. And That was too bad. I was sad when I saw that. They're
Yeah.
insane looking.
Yeah, they're so beautiful, and they keep getting better. And I have to follow up and just see, like, people, the breeders that have bred them, and how they're doing with the wobble. Like the feedback I've been getting has been like they don't have a wobble. Like if they develop a wobble, I'm not sure. Um, but I agree with you. That's the scoriest. The ones, there's some that just look insane. Really,
Yeah.
really cool.
What's the other one? Is it champagne? Where there's like, is it champagne or am I just making things up? They look like they have like no pattern on them. It's like, what am I thinking? It's not champagne. That's bald.
Sterling. You're talking about
Sterling.
Sterling.
Yeah. Sterling. Those guys look insane too.
Those are
Those,
nice. They're nice and clean, right? Yeah.
yeah. That's a beautiful animal. But also, I mean, I like normals too. I mean, there were so many when I was shopping around for my female. There was so many that I saw them, and it made me like stop and stare. And I'm like, wow, that's just a normal.
Mhm.
It's just a beautiful animal.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you
Def-
how many normals do you get, and is it hard to find a home for them, or is it easier because the price point is that more of like a pet boa for people?
um, so normals from that litter I told you earlier, not from the Aztec, but the RC Pastel. One or two normals came from that litter, and um, they sell because of the lower price point, and there's not a lot genetics to them, so it's just 50% het blood. But because it's a normal, it's just sold as a normal, even though they came from that pairing. It's sold as a normal.
Nice.
Yeah,
Do you work with any IMGs?
I do. Yep, definitely. That's the Aztec that I paired up with the IMG Labyrinth. Have some couple of pictures up there with the Labtex. So that's the IMG Labyrinth Aztec. Actually, this one right here, that's a
Wow.
Labtec right there. So that's the IMG that I produced here. I think 2022 was when they were born. April 1st. I know April 1st, and I think it's 2023. Yeah, I have to check my records. There's so much information that I like have to go to my phone and my notes, and that's where I have all my all my dates.
Yeah, you have too many animals.
Yeah.
How can you remember everything?
Yep.
What is the average litter size?
So for me, it's been I would say like 15 average litter sizes that I've had.
Okay.
15.
And what's the ideal temperature? Like what do you keep them at normally throughout the year for a hot spot? And then what do you keep them at when they're gravid?
So the ideal hot spot that I keep mine at is going to be 88 to 90 on the hot spot, and then no lower than 75 on the cool side. 75, 78 on the cool spot.
Okay.
And then now when it comes to like the temperature drop, they are what do you call it? Like I adjust it as they are. I do drop the temperature just a little bit. Let's say like all the way up to 85 on the cold spot, and then no lower than 73 on the cool end.
Okay. And how long is that for?
It starts about November timeframe, and then it'll go all the way up to March.
Okay.
Just to keep up like the same thing that it would be on the seasons. That's how long it would be.
Yeah, and I'm sure being in Virginia, the temperature outside is helping you push that right along, right?
Yes. I actually was in New York before moving to Virginia, and that was not cool on the light bill. The light bill was expensive.
I bet.
I'm
Jeez.
so glad I'm no longer there.
So how do you heat your obviously so the animals that are in the racks are on probably heat tape, right?
Yep. So the rack systems have this metal like sheet. I guess it's a metal sheet, and then it kind of folds over, and then it has the heat tape underneath it that goes across the racks, and then that's what causes the whichever side that tape is on to heat up. And then I have the vivarium electronic ones that has the heat tape towards the back, and then towards the front there's no heat tape. And then I use a thermostat, well the gun thermostat, to take the temperatures on each one to ensure that they're like on point. And one of the things too is checking on one, there's the routine that you mentioned earlier is one, also check all the lights, like all my thermostats are on and working, functioning, checking that the temperature, the highs and lows, they're not, something's off. So enough to catch something early. So if there's like, wait, why is this thermostat getting so hot? You can identify like, hey, maybe there's something going on with this specific heat tape that's causing it. But luckily I've set all mine up with the heat tape where, they're not getting damaged. The thermostats or the probes are actually like in the location where they ideal to get the best temperature. And then I use there's different thermostats out there. The ones that I liked so far were the Barbarian Electronics and the Spider. I have one.
Oh yeah, the Herp stats.
Yeah, Herpstats. I just ended up getting one like a couple of weeks ago, but my Barbarian Electronics have not failed me like at all.
Nice. Now, what are you setting your actual your herp stat to get you to that 8890 hotspot inside when you temp gun?
So depends on where I put the probe. So if I put the probe like underneath, because of different rack systems, like if I sacrifice one of the rack tubs, I put the probe right where the hotspot would be. I would set it right to 88. And then if I can't sacrifice that rack, then I'll put it underneath. And then once I do a couple of checks by the temp gun that, hey, the heat tape or the location of this probe is, 5 degrees cooler because it's on the outside, and it's or closer to the actual heat tape, then I ensure that where the enclosure, inside the enclosure, like that is at 88.
Okay. And what are you doing for subs? Like, do you do substrate or do you do paper?
I do paper towels.
Oh, okay. For everything?
For everything.
Wow, that's got to be a lot of work.
That it's, I've used them so much that it's really like roll, cut. It's just like expert.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And what about have you ever done any kind of coconut substrate or anything like that, or you just it would? I mean, honestly, I guess I don't know. I guess it would be a toss up on which one's more work, because I mean, you have to prep all that, and
So because of the amount of boas that I have, to me, logically, it didn't make sense to have that cocoa substrate. One, because you have, like for me, the idea of having the cocoa substrate is to maintain that humidity in specifically that rack or that enclosure, which does a great job at it. So instead of like missing them, you just keep that cocoa substrate and that maintain that humidity. There's things about it that I thought not for me. The potential of that cocoa substrate to develop bacteria because it just, they pooped or peed somewhere, and then eventually too much humidity, cleaning it up and finding it, digging around for poop or substrate and finding where it just was like, no, I can't. But because of my humidifier that maintains the 60 to 70% humidity, I find that I don't need that cocoa substrate to maintain that humidity because they have healthy sheds.
Yeah.
And it's throughout the entire room that maintains that, proper temperature. And you also take into account the temperature in the room itself and the humidity that it maintains and the temperature of the heat tape that you have to keep it up. So multiple things kind of working together. During the summertime, the temperatures could reach 90 degrees in that room where I don't have to keep those heat tapes turned on the whole thing because the inside of the room itself is at 90. So you don't want to keep that hot spot because if you overlook that temperature, like that heat tape is going to reach, even with that thermostat, is going to change and fluctuate.
Yeah. Do you have any concerns about like IBD?
Yes, definitely. That is something that's monitored by keeping, everything separate, cleaning all those tubs, quarantining all the animals. That is, again, I actually have stopped getting the animals like or buying now, because initially I was getting boas, but now, like, because I have my own collection, like I restrict the amount of animals coming in. And then also I do have a partnership that's starting with Imperator Morphs, and they health test their animals that are coming over from Europe, in order for them to not have and be tested for IBD.
Oh, that's awesome. How do they test them?
Veterinary, they go and do the draw the blood from the babies, and random testing from the babies themselves,
Wow.
and then they test those boas.
Wow. Have you ever have they told you if they've ever had any come back positive?
No, no, not
That's
that I
good.
know of. No.
That's awesome. Yeah, it does. It seems like it's not as big of a deal as it used to be. So that's always a fear with the boas. What about? Are there any other health concerns that you've run into, like RIs and things like that? And how do you deal with that?
Yep. So definitely, I have a veterinarian. The respiratory infections, I think, are can happen, whether it's overlooking an animal, and I've had respiratory infection with one or two of my boas, but I've been able to successfully bring them back and recover from that. One is making sure that all my temperatures and everything is straight. I don't know what caused the respiratory infection in them, but I was able to take them to the vet. The vet looked them over, checked them out, gave them the prescription, recommended dosage, and then treated them. Now, one thing that I learned through getting those respiratory infections, right, is to ensure that the treatment is followed, and then after the treatment is done, you actually monitor that boa, because if the doctor, the veterinarian, explained that even though you might not see symptoms in your boa, the boa snakes in general have a slower metabolism, where it's going to take them longer to recover. So even though you might see those symptoms are no longer there, you continue to give them medication until that's resolved. And luckily, like I've been to have no issues with RIs after that.
So what were you given to treat that? Was it an injection or was it an oral route?
So I know that one time he used pills that I had to dissolve in water and give them by mouth.
Oh
And then
wow.
another one was the injections. Um, and then there's also liquid. So I don't know if it was the different medication that he just decided to use, but it was there's the oral, and then there's the the injection. Now I think he doesn't like to do the injections. I think because it does cause other or might cause other complications when you inject. And then the issue with giving them the medication itself, um, the stress on the animal, and then but there's a variety of medications that he's given.
Okay. And how long were you giving the medication for? Is it like a 2 weeks?
Oh, it's 30 days, and
Oh
then
wow.
take them back to the vet to ensure that, hey, like, they're doing good. There's no symptoms. So 30 days is what. And the dosage too is not a high dosage or try to like speedy recovery. It's a 30-day. This is the vet that I've trusted, and he's been really great.
Wow. Yeah, that seems very thorough. So when you're dealing with that, do you have to take that animal out of the collection or isolate that animal, or do you just leave them where they are and then just try to make sure that you're cleaning yourself or dealing with that animal last?
Best practice is to quarantine it, the separate rack, like separate, completely different tubs, in order to maintain that sterile environment, in order to minimize any other contact or spread of RI or anything.
Yeah. When that happened, did it happen to spread to any other animals, or did it just stay isolated to that one animal?
It stayed isolated.
That's good.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
didn't have any spread of RI.
that's good. Yeah, I recently had to deal with one with my ball python, and yeah, it was. I get very very anxious during that period of time, and I didn't have the ability to isolate it and put it in another area unless I put it into quarantine with new snakes, which I really didn't want to do because then it would be there for you know 60 to 90 days with the rest of the animals. And,
Mhm.
so yeah, it's just something we got to deal with.
Mhm. Yeah.
When that happened, was it during the change of the seasons, or was it during the winter or fall during the cooler temperatures?
It is during the change of the seasons, or that happened during the change of the seasons. And then additionally during the move. So I lived in New York. Then I had to move. I actually ended up moving 3 times in less than 2 years.
Jeez.
And that was like, never want to move again. Like it's a terrible experience. In order to move, and this is less than 100 boas too at the time. So moving all those racks, moving everybody, like securely packing everything up. Like I think with that movement in 2 years, 3 times, to have three or two respiratory infections was, that's success with
Yeah.
no fatalities. So
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, that's where that experience in the military and logistics comes in.
Yeah. Do you have family that's in Virginia?
Oh, right now my mom is visiting just to help out with me recovering from surgery, but no other family in Virginia.
How does she feel about the snakes?
Um, she's supportive. I mean, she's not in love with them. So she's I'm Hispanic, so she was born with snakes are bad and not introduced her to anything. But I took her to a reptile show here that they had in Williamsburg, not in Virginia, and she was shocked. It was like, wow, like there's a lot of people that are into this because, I think initially she's like, why do you have? She thinks I'm strange, but she's not afraid of them. She didn't have any fear of them. I think she thinks it's weird, but for her, it's just like, hey, if you're happy doing what you're doing, then go for it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Initially during the surgery, like that, she ended up helping me, all those cleaning and tubs. Like she was all for it. So I'm lucky to have like that support from her. Is also my wife that she also ended up, assisting me through that process. Because imagine having a total knee replacement surgery. Even now, like I still need that help. So that assistance with them.
yeah. How do you deal with that? Going through that surgery and everything, and then having larger animals and all that. But I mean, I'm assuming that they're not cage defensive or anything, so it's not too dangerous going in there for mom or your wife.
Yeah, no, there's only and the help that I needed with more like cleaning bowls, like as far as like them taking stuff out and
That's
that's
not
me.
happening.
Yeah, that's me. That's my what do you call it? My expertise, making sure that the things are clean. But as far as like taking care of the water bowls and cleaning some tubs, then that help out. The What was I going to mention to you? What was the question again?
Just going through the knee replacement and having to deal with the animals and all that and the maintenance.
Yep. So the knee replacement, I after it, the doctor pretty much the what is it called when they give you post op instructions? It's
Hmm.
like use it, and abuse it. And I was like, what? It's like it just doesn't line up. After you have a knee replacement, you would imagine be like, let me take care of this thing. Like I'm going to take it easy. But no, like within the first day, they were like, okay, get up. You need to start walking. Like start
Wow.
using it, start bending it, start and that is the protocol for knee replacement is you're not going to break it unless you have a super hard impact that you can affect the surgery. But the best thing was for me to start staying active, walking around, moving around, limping as much as I can, and try to get back into a normal, because you kind of have to develop a new walking, or what do you call it? Get used
Gate,
to
like a new gate.
a new gait, and also you guard as you have any injury. You start guarding that area. But now I'm at the 3 month mark where there's still aches and pains that are there, and there's protectiveness or guarding it, but it's getting better as the time passes, where you kind of forget that you had surgery and it feels like a normal knee.
That's awesome. So despite the pain, they want you to just work through that.
Yeah, yeah. This like I think the balance of like the medications they give you, it does subside that pain. So I was initially shocked with me standing up and not feeling anything, but they do have a nerve block that completely like doesn't, you can't feel it. So I was like, oh, this is great. Like, but once that started to wear off, that's when you started to feel that elevated pain. But then they give you medications to take home, and then you kind of have to stay on top of that pain. And through having 8 total surgeries, it wasn't until the 6th or 7th one that I learned that, hey, you don't wait for the pain to kick in. You stay ahead of it, and you take the medication prior to the pain starting for you to be able to tolerate that surgery, or basically like be able to not be completely put down as far as like, man, I can't move because of all this pain. It's like, hey, you're still be able to be somewhat active.
It's too bad they can't just keep giving you the nerve block the whole time.
Right. I know that would actually, I don't know. I think that would actually cause more damage, because then you're just walking around with a loose knee.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. I guess you have to be a little bit careful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you ever do any herping or anything like that?
No, actually, I've thought about it. There's a nice trail down back here. I think maybe in a year, because, for me right now to just walk, enjoy a home grilled grocery with my wife, like that's not happening.
Yeah.
Before the surgery, it was already a struggle. Now is at a point where, I'm rehabbing, and I think 5-10 minutes, a good walk, it's already starts to ache. And then that ache also brings on irritability. And then, you become a person you don't want to be around if you're irritable. So I try to manage that. And this rehab kind of prolong the walk. And now it's feeling better, where I can do 5-10 minutes and then gradually increase to a better. So that herping, I think, I haven't found anybody to be herping with. I don't even know what herping is. So maybe you can enlighten me what it is. I imagine it's just going around in the woods and finding.
Yeah, you go look for reptiles and amphibians and everything.
And just catch them, take pictures
Yeah,
of them.
look at them. Yeah, take pictures, newts and salamanders. I'm sure you guys have all sorts of cool stuff in Virginia. Garter snakes, I'm assuming.
Yeah,
do you ever go back to Ecuador?
No, not yet.
Oh man, you could do some epic herping there.
Well, Ecuador right now, it's not a good place to be right now.
Yeah.
Like, I think they're powered. Like my mom's told me, the power keeps going out. Like they only have, I think at 11 o'clock the power goes out. And yeah, not at this time. I've wanted to go back and visit and maybe see like how things have changed, but maybe when things get better over there.
Yeah, that would be pretty terrible, having no power.
It's one of the things that I do want, and I haven't done it yet, and I think it's partly, maybe I'll do, is I do want to have an Ecuadorian boa. And I don't know if you've seen pictures of those.
Yeah.
Just gorgeous animals. Just because I'm from Ecuador and being able to have, when you asked me earlier about the localities, if I have a locality, I only have one locality, which is a Suriname. It's a mega peak Suriname, and just different type of animal, just like the head structure, the colors, really, really cool. And eventually I think I'll end up getting an Ecuadorian boa. I haven't just found somebody to like be selling one, like one that really catches my eye, and for me to get one.
Yeah, that would be cool. I mean, coming from a place, where your heritage is from, and being able to have the locality would be awesome.
I ended up getting I don't know the scientific name, but it's a tarantula, purple bloom tarantula. It was at a pet store here in Pet World in Virginia, and I passed by it, and it was sitting there, and it says Ecuadorian red bloom, not purple bloom, red bloom. I looked at it. I said, Ecuadorian, that's cool. A whole month, it was meant to be, because a whole month passed by before I finally was like, I gave in. It was just sitting there. Nobody's taking it home. And now I love that thing. Like, it's really cool to have. Are you into tarantulas?
I had been. I have a pretty healthy fear of spiders, or unhealthy, I guess you'd say.
Uh-huh.
And when I back when I had gotten into snakes initially, like back in 2010, 2011, I had this debilitating fear of spiders. I mean, especially here in Florida, we have huntsman spiders that are like that big around, and they're just these big, fast moving. Their movement is disturbing. It's just like, it was so like off putting and upsetting, and so I went and got. I had gotten, I think, 15 spiderlings that were, it was like 7 red rumps and 7 curly hairs, all captive bred, and they were tiny, like this, like you could fit probably 2 of them on a dime. They came in segments of straw with cotton stuffed on each end.
Mhm.
And what else did I get? I think a Trinidad chevron, and I had pink toes. And needless to say, I got over my arachnophobia,
Mhm.
where then, growing all these spiders up, I got really comfortable with them.
Mhm.
And I was just really okay with holding them, especially as they grew. And, they ended up being like the size of the palm of my hand. And yeah, it was a good therapeutic experience. And one of the cages, I remember I left it open, and the spider would come out and was going uh up the curtains every night, and going along the curtain rod back and forth, and was spinning webs up there. And I hadn't noticed until maybe, like, it had happened for like a week and a half, and I go to feed him again, and I'm like, oh my God, I left this, it could have even been like 2 weeks. I had left it open, and I maybe it was like a week and a half. I had gone in there and noticed that the top was open. And so this spider would come out every night, spin webs all over the curtain rod and the curtains, and then go back into its burrow.
Uh-huh.
And so I had like a free roaming tarantula in my snake room back in the day.
Oh, wow.
And I ended up just kind of leaving it open. And because it was a very well sealed off room, I remember I had actually replaced the door. So the door was like completely down to the ground, so nothing could, come out. And yeah, it was a big ass spider. So
Oh, man.
I wouldn't do that now, but
Yeah.
but yeah, being a 20-year-old, I thought it was the coolest thing in the world that I had a free range tarantula.
Yeah. I had an experience with a banana spider. Have you seen those?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So they're during SERE school, as you're running around the woods, and if you have to escape and evade, and the last thing on your mind is running into a spider web with a banana spider in your face. Yep,
Mm.
that happened. It was terrifying. I still remember that feeling. It brings me kind of like the I developed a little bit of fear of spiders when watching that show. I don't know if you've seen it, Deadliest Animals and something like that, and then like show brown recluse and what it can do to you.
Sure.
And after
Yeah,
that, it's like I see every spider as a brown recluse.
I
But
know.
for a while, I think I had that kind of like, oh, you're a brown recluse, even though you don't look like one. Like, I'm not judging you. Like, get away. I'm
Yeah.
moving. But now I think with that tarantula, these fangs and the way it moves, and like, I don't know, I'm infatuated with this tarantula. It's really cool. Um,
Do you handle it?
no, no. Yeah, actually, you mentioned it now that you forgot the cage open. It got me thinking, as like, man, what happened if I would have forgotten like the enclosure I have it in, and I'm pretty conscious about it, but hey, like mistakes happen, and I could forget it. Like, what would I do?
Yeah.
I know, I can't tell my wife. Like,
Yeah.
I couldn't tell her.
I had all sorts of stupid stuff. I mean, I ended up with Deathstalker scorpions, and things I never should have had.
Mhm.
Once I went down that arachnid path, and there's things that still catch my eye, and I just draw a line. I'm like, nope, not doing it, because otherwise I'm going to go down the rabbit hole. And I kept them in big enclosures with really, really deep substrate. It was probably like 6 to 8 inches deep.
Mhm.
So they would have these burrows that just were all over under there. So that and that spider had grown up in that enclosure and was in there. And, I would go in there and water plants and things like that. And that spider had no reason to want to leave that enclosure permanently. Like it wanted to go back into its burrow. It would come out and do its thing at night and then go back in.
One thing that this tarantula I have surprised me, just the way I've been feeding it is like I slide the cage, and I get the mealworm and I drop it right in front of its face, and I'm pretty relatively close to it. Like, let's say the spider's here, like I'm just like boop, and then he'll just grab it and then munch on it and then eat it. But one time, I forget what I was doing, but I hovered over the top of the screen mesh cage, and I don't know how. I mean, it's the speed on this thing is crazy because it ended up just flipping upside down. I thought maybe it was thought it was food, that I was giving it some food, and it just went from here to here so quick.
Wow.
I was surprised. So as far as handling, and I've got the shed. Yeah, I got this shed from one of them, and I well, during the shed, which I learned about recently, is they create a they don't burrow. He's straight out in the open, like, what's up? Like, I got fangs. But what they do is they spin a web like on the mat, and then once they're ready to molt, they'll stop eating, and then they'll flip over. And then I watched the video. I didn't catch mine doing it, but they kind of like twitch like they're dying, and then they molt just like snakes. I was able to get that shed because I didn't know if it was a male or female, and then took it out. Obviously, I put it in water because those little hairs, you don't want to be messing with those things. So I put it in water, and then I was able to identify the sex of that tarantula. I also saw how big their fans were. I was like, nope. I don't think you and me handling is not going to be. I want to be honest with you. Like, I'm just like risking getting bitten. And I think somebody told me, I went to after I got this tarantula, I went and saw a reptile show here. They had tarantulas there, and then I was asking about them because they look really cool. And I was like, hey, what about this one? And he was like, hey, like, do you have experience with them? I was like, nope. He's like, yeah, that one you don't want to start off with. Like, you want to start off with something because this one is like their venom, is toxic more than others. And he was like, yeah, this, like, handling these are a little bit more. I don't think it was handling, just keeping them. You got to be more responsible, I think.
Yeah.
But I was like, what? Like, this one's more dangerous? No, okay, never mind. That turned me away from doing that, from getting another one.
Yeah, that. And I'm sure that there's going to be people that are listening to this that are into arachnids, and they're probably screaming at us right now for not saying the right thing. At least me. I mean, I'm totally uneducated when it comes to arachnids, but I even had a bird eating spider, and that thing was terrifying the way the way it moved. I don't know. When I got it, I mean, like I said, I was probably 20, 21 years old and just buying things that I had no business owning. And one of them was definitely the bird eating spider. That thing was huge. It was probably wild caught. I got it at a reptile show, and it was just big and fast. And I couldn't imagine being bit by that. That would be a nightmare.
Yeah, I have noticed, I use my thongs and I reach in to pick up its water bowl, rinse it out, give it fresh water.
Yeah.
And I find it drinks water. Like, it goes up to the little thing and sticks its head in there. I haven't caught it actually drinking, but it's hovering over the waters, which I find really cool. But, when you are doing that, or I lift it up and it's kind of close, I mean, it's ready to pounce. So me and handling, I'm enjoying it from afar. And
yeah. I've noticed some of my snakes will hover over their water bowls at night. Like, I'll come in the room, and if they're at that like 10 or 12th day of not being fed yet, I'll notice that they all have like these branches up, up at the top, and they'll kind of hang like right near their water bowl. And in my mind, I just imagine that they're waiting for prey to come by, You know, like if you're in nature, right, you're gonna hang out near a body of water. I mean, that's what most predators do, is they wait for something, you know, that needs to rely on that water source as well to come by. And whenever I see that, it makes me wonder if that's just they're hardwired to hang out near bodies of water, you know, no matter how small it is, that, hey, you know, if something is alive in here, it's going to come, you know, it's going to come over this way.
Yeah, that makes sense. Instinctively, they're hardwired to have that. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good.
I've noticed that with my boas, and it's the coolest thing. They get so keyed in on it, you know, when it's been like almost 2 weeks, they just take that position up on one of their branches and just start staring down, like they're just waiting for something to come by and you know, take it out.
You think it's also the timing, and then where you're putting your, like, I don't know, do you take them out of their enclosure, or do you use thongs, and that's the usual spot that they strike in, like where you feed them at?
I have a couple that I've had some rats pop, which was just the most disgusting experience I've ever had to deal with, where they especially the boas, they wrap like nobody else's business, you know. And I don't know if I soaked the rats too long. I don't know what I did wrong, but man, they bit and wrapped, and I just saw them kept squeezing and squeezing, and the stomach of the rat got bigger and bigger until it popped open. And I think it had to have been I soaked him too long that day, because it happened with, I think, two different animals. It happened with one of my Timors,
Mhm.
and the smell was horrendous. You know,
Mhm.
like it smelled like raw liver in the snake room. And I was actually getting ready to do a podcast with Roy Bloodget, and I messaged him and I'm like, dude, I'm so sorry. Like, I have to clean up this mess now. Like, there's blood and literal guts, you know, like strewn across. So I started feeding some of them in tubs,
Mhm.
whether or not, now I've always done that with my Argentine boa, because her rats are just like, you know, bigger. They have more water in their coat and everything. And it's just, it leaves, like, I hate like cleaning up the bedding after doing that. So it's really easy with her to just take her out, put her in a tub. I can do some maintenance on her cage then while she's eating, you know. I try to do that with the boas. The Timors, I don't do it with the Timors, because they're, you know, I don't want to freak them out to the point where they're not going to eat.
Mhm.
But yeah, with my boas, since I have such a limited amount, and since they popped a couple of them, now I just take them out and I put them in tubs. But the problem is, now putting them in tubs, they always think they're going to get food. So
Yeah.
like, even just, you know, if I put them in there just to put them in there, you know, because I'm trying to handle something in the cage, or set something up, then they, you know, I take the lid off and their mouth is open and they're flailing around ready for something to fall in.
You, you know what I
But
noticed with mine is that they have, unless they smell food, they'll go into feeding mode and they're
mm,
ready. But once that passes, because I've you know fed them not on the same day, so 2 weeks, and the adults are different days. Like they'll be on that, so I know, like, hey, like this, I can't go messing around with opening up these other racks, because like I know they're ready to strike. But I noticed that I don't. It's just the smell of food that triggers them. Other than that, I can handle them and reach in. There's two boas, maybe three, that I know are crazy.
yeah.
They just wake up and choose violence. One of them is actually getting better. Um, and then the other one, which is actually on Morph Market, I've had it labeled as Spicy Red Dragon. It's gradually getting better, and I'm putting in the time to get that boa um, docile.
Yeah.
You still can't fully trust it, but those are the only two that I know I have to be mindful and to not get struck. But I've been bitten so many times that I've become very desensitized to it.
Mm,
Anywhere from a bigger boa to like a subadult boa, I've been hit, and it's like I don't, not any adults. not so far any adults. The biggest one did latch on here, wrapped around, and I was just like, okay, you're gonna let go at some time, but it's that initial shock, and then I'm just like, I great. And if he doesn't let go immediately, then I kind of start, maneuvering it just to kind of not prying it off or freaking out. It's just like, man, like you got me.
Yeah.
So,
I remember I had a Savu python back in the day, and that thing bit and wrapped me so hard. I mean, I remember my hand turning like purple.
mm,
The wrap it had on my forearm and wrist was just insane. And I must have waited like 30 or 40 minutes before I was like, all right, let's try intervening with some cold water or, something to try to get this thing off. But man, that was not a pleasant experience. And that was, I think, a full grown Savu, but it was just food drive. These boas that you're talking about, are they defensive or are they just food driven? Do they think that food's coming into the tub?
those two, the defensive. It's
Yeah.
just defensive. I had one adult um, wrap around, not bite. It just, I don't know if it just decided that I think you're prey, but there was no smell. I think it just decided one time. And the force and sheer force where you really feel how strong they are, and you can't pry those things off. Like it just like yours wrapped around your arm and it was like locked in.
Yeah.
It was like, I'm a pretty strong guy, and I'm not gonna force its way out either. But like I felt that entire thing constrict on my arm, where I was like, man, you're pretty strong.
Mm.
Like, I mean, to the point where my arm wasn't turning like a different color, but there was no way that I would be able to wrap it off, like fight with it to pull it out. It was more like, okay, let me put my arm in your enclosure and let you decide to go and let go and crawl away, or slither away. And that's what it did. But it's the incredible power that these balls have it's really cool.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, their boas are a different kind of strong for sure. They really are. Hey, can you walk me through SERE real quick? Are you okay with talking about that with your experience?
I think there's a couple of things I can share with you. There's a couple of things because it is kept. Some stuff I could probably share. I just got to be mindful of what I say.
Yeah.
What specific as far as like walking you through SERE?
Well, just because you've brought it up twice, and if anybody's listening, I mean, just like a broad overview of what it is.
Okay, so survival, evasion, rescue, escape. So as a helicopter pilot in aviation in general, if you're a member of an air crew and the potential for you to get shot down and land in enemy lines, you're gonna have to have training in order for you to be able to do those, what do you call, survive, escape, rescue, and evade. So SERE basically is I believe it's 6 weeks. And this happened like 10, 15 years ago. So whoever's listening, I'm getting old and my memory's not as great as it used to be. So if I'm wrong on the dates and the time, but it's a course. Okay.
Yeah.
And they do have the Air Force SERE, they have the Army SERE, and basically the air crew has to go and pass that. So a overview of SERE school is they're basically teaching you survival skills. Survival skills where it's a lot of it mainly is going to be academics. So they bring you to a room, they give you the course, and they teach you PowerPoint, presentations and instructors that come in, and the whole process kind of the program itself is so great. It's a training that I love that I never want to do again. And the way it's set up, right? It's like you go through academics and it gradually they start kind of like starving you. So eventually, like there's a point where you end up going to the field, and by that time you're already hungry because like the the timing. I specifically remember this because, man, like eating and your body and your mind enter a different state of, how can I explain it? When I was in the bus and we were going somewhere, let's just, they take us in buses to this place. I specifically remember being more conscious of like, can I eat that tree? And that's kind of what the academics teach you is like, hey, this is what you should do in case of, you need to find food. Like there's tests that you can do to like, hey, is this plant, are you allergic to it? And then they have the skin test, and then you kind of have to do, armpit test. If that develops a rash, then obviously you might be, then the taste test. So there's like things that they teach you along this process for you to be able to find a food source in order to sustain yourself if you ever have to survive in an austere environment where you're fighting or surviving for your life. So there's that portion of it. And then there's another portion where academics are teaching you about how to survive in a hostage scenario. And so on. Academics, I got to be careful what I share. I don't want to overshare things, but it's just academics. And then you go into the actual application of those things. So scenarios that you encounter and what you learned and you put into application. And
in this, when they're putting it into practice, you're hungry and you're probably sleep deprived, right?
Yes. So the what they teach you in academics, it's not like you get to experience it. I think that's the best way to put it. Is the what you've been taught in the classroom, it's you actually go and implement it in a scenario that is with, I don't want to say actors, but not really. They put you in this situation where you believe you're in that, even though it's training, like it's real. Like there's no, you become immersed. I think that's the best way to put it.
Yeah.
They're so good at what they do that you become immersed in this world that it's training, you believe it's training, but you feel like this is different.
Like something went wrong. The guardrails are gone.
They make it as realistic as possible, where you definitely get the full training experience. Like, let me see if I can tell you this though. So let's just say, like, I was, man, I better not. I rather just, stay to so the reason why, like, conscious, even though I'm retired, right? The purpose of the training and what you share from the training that you go through, the little bit of information that possibly is not out on the internet or you can read about, you don't want the enemy to know the type of training that you're going through. Sure. So, it's like that's kicking in, it's like the purpose of the bigger picture of like, hey, you have to be careful as to what you share, because you don't know that individual that is in that austere environment and the enemy has known these things, like now you are placing them at risk.
I get that. So, well, I just want to say that I've heard of it, and you're a badass for having gone through it. And it's from what I've heard, it's something I would never want to go through. And so it's and I totally understand where you're coming from and not wanting to disclose that. But it's gnarly from what I've heard. So
it's cool. You look at it different once you're done with it. A lot of people, I think, say the same thing. It's like, it was the best training in my life that I never want to repeat again. But you take so much out of there too, because it made you value things that you didn't before. So I became closer with my family. I looked at plants and trees differently. Now, like, I feel more confident that I can in a situation where I do need to survive, it gave me all that training to be able to implement that. Not that I ever need to here in Williamsburg, Virginia, but
Sure. Yeah, but the 24 years that you served the country,
yeah.
that's a good thing to have.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. It's definitely, I would do it all over again. Like the invaluable experience of the plenty of jobs and different jobs that I've had have made me who I am today. And um, it's something I would recommend, like the service. And I don't think everybody's cut out for it, but if you have that sense of like serving the country and not serving the country, but providing that military service, like it makes you into a different person for the better. Yeah.
Yeah, I respect the shit out of it, and thank you very much for your service, sir. I appreciate it.
Yeah, man. No, thank you so much for those kind words. It means a lot. Even though I've been retired for 24 years, be retired for 2 years and served for 24 years, like hearing that really, it does mean a lot to me.
Yeah. Well, and this should be coming out right around Veterans Day. And so I appreciate you coming on and telling your story and putting it out there for people.
Yeah, man. I'm such an honor to have been part of your podcast, and I definitely look forward to talking to you again and staying in contact. And again, I can't thank you enough. I definitely see you doing like from where you started, and you told me earlier on we started talking in June. You just started this in June, and you just come off like a person that's been doing this just naturally. So I encourage you to keep it up, man. And I hope this went good enough that we have a part 2. And as I become more comfortable with being on camera, and this is my second time doing sort of a podcast, it is nerve-wracking. I'll be honest with you. It was nerve-wracking just thinking about it. But I know, some of the people that are probably looking at this and listening, and I'll share my perspective on it, is like, get out of that comfort zone to where it's not over. I've talked, maybe said some wrong things along the way, but I think it all comes from a good place for me, where I'm putting myself in this uncomfortable scenario in order for me to personally grow and make it look as easy as Adam has.
Oh, please. Now you went too far.
You can edit that out.
Thank you, Washington. I appreciate it. And again, thank you for your service, and have a great weekend, sir.
Yeah. Thanks for your time. Appreciate it, Adam.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.